So now that we know what state is, let's try to implement it in our small project. And just as a quick reminder, what we want to happen is that when we click this next and this previous button, we basically want the step to change. So the step here is currently set to 1, but we want this step variable basically to be dynamic. And so for that, we now need to add a new piece of state to our component. So let's get rid of this and add that new piece of state. So in order to use state in practice in a component, we do it in 3 steps. First, we add a new state variable, then we use it in the code, and usually in JSX, and third, we then update the piece of state in some event handler. And so let's start with the first step, which is to actually create the state variable. And we do so using the useState function that React provides to us. So that's useState. And if now I hit enter on my keyboard as this useState here is selected in the VS Code autocomplete, VS Code will automatically import the useState function from React. So this line of code right here. Now, if for some reason that didn't happen in your code editor, then make sure that you import the useState function from React in that way. So the useState function is a function, and so it takes an argument. And the argument that we need to specify here is the default value of this state variable. So that's, in our case, step number 1, right? Now this useState function here will return an array. And so actually, let's just call that array for now and then log it to the console. So just so you see. And so, yeah, now step is no longer defined. Let's just put that back for a minute. Step equals 1. And then open up our console here. So this is the array. And so you see it has 2 values here. So this first value, so this number 1, is the default value that we want for our state. So this one here. And then the second one is a function that we can use to update our state variable. So what we usually do is to then immediately destructure this array right here. So first we have step, which again is this first right here. And so this will be our state variable itself. And then second, again, we have the function. And so this one we usually call set, and then the name of the state variable. So set step in this case. Now we can get rid of this. And if we now reload, we see that our app is already using that piece of state, so that step variable, because this is exactly the variable name that we had before. So we are already using the step in our JSX here, and also here for this class name. Okay, so we have completed the first step of defining the state variable using the useState function, and the second step in which we use the state variable, so this step piece of state in our code. And so now the third step is to actually update the state in an event handler. So let's get rid of this alert, which was just a placeholder. Or actually, let's start with this one. So with the next one. So now it's time to use this set step function here. So we use set step to update the step state variable. And so what do we want the step to be? Well, basically just the current step plus 1, right? So when we click the next button, the step should go 1 up. And so that's the current step plus 1. And so now we are ready to test this. So let's see. And yeah, that works. So our component is now dynamic. And so congratulations, you just unlocked the power of state and the power of React. So what happened here as we clicked on this button was that the handle next event handler function was called, and this event handler then updated the step state. And so then React automatically rendered this new component view for us. So that's just amazing. Now let's go back here and implement also the handle previous function. And here we basically want the opposite. So set step and then step -1. So let's see. And yeah, that works. However, right now we have a small bug in our app, because watch what happens when I keep clicking here. So you see step 0 and step -1 and so on. And the same here. So if I keep going, then of course we have no more elements in our array to show. So the array only has 3 elements, and so step 5 or anything below step 0 doesn't make any sense. And so here in the handler function, we can simply add a condition in order to prevent that. So let's just say if the step is greater than 1, only then set this step. And then here, something similar. So if the step is less than 3. So let's see, let's reload this. And so now if I click next, so right now the step is 3. So this one here is no longer true. And so now then this part should not be executed. And indeed, that works. So we fixed that small bug, and now our component is working just as we wanted. Great. Now just a few more things about the creation of the state variable here. So first of all, this useState function here is what we call a hook in React. And we can identify hooks because they start with this use keyword here. So all the React functions that start with use like this, for example, use effect or use reducer, and of course this useState, are React hooks. And we will learn in detail what a React hook is a bit later. But for now, what you need to know is that we can only call hooks like useState on the top level of the function. So of this component function right here. So only here is it allowed to call useState, not inside an if statement or inside another function or inside a loop. So for example, we could not do this. So immediately React would then tell us that the useState hook was called in a function that is not a React function component. So we can only do that right here. So also not in an if statement. So let's say if true, for example, then let's see. And again, you see immediately that we get this error saying that the useState was called conditionally. And before it actually gets to this dramatic error here, we can even see in this overlay in VS Code that React hook was called conditionally. And this one here is coming from ESLint, by the way. And that's why it was so important to set up ESLint in the beginning. Okay, but anyway, let's remove all of this. And now the other important thing about state is that we should really only update state using this setter function right here, so not manually. Now just to finish, I just noticed that here we actually don't need this when we use our step here. So there's no need for a template literal here, because here we are not really creating a new string. We are just basically outputting a new string based here on this ternary operator. But anyway, we now have this nice dynamic component, all without the imperative DOM manipulations that we need in vanilla JavaScript.